Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for this week's SiS Masters powered by SiS, Sports Innovation Society. Every week we share with leaders around the world in different fields of the sports industry. Today we have the honor to welcome Nate Appleman, Vice President, Director of Sports, Recreation and Entertainment at HOK. HOK is one of global leaders in designing buildings and spaces that respond to the need of people and the environment. In sport, one great example that most of you know is the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, which received a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, if I'm correct. Ned, very much welcome. Thanks for being with us today. And first and foremost, how do you feel in those very difficult times?
It's been quite an adjustment. I'm probably over 90 days now of working from home. And this is probably the longest that it's been that I haven't been on an airplane in probably a decade. So quite an unusual time and set of circumstances. But I feel very blessed and very fortunate that from an architectural profession standpoint, we've been able to pivot and adjust and really be able to still do our work, serving our clients and keeping projects going even under the circumstances. So as good as it can be, given the circumstances, for sure.
Great, good to hear that. And we're going to go through some questions for about 45 minutes, up to an hour. The audience also is able to send questions through the Q&A section on the screen down. And we're going to go to the audience question at the end. But before we go to what you do now, I'd like to go back in time, when you didn't have that beard, and go back in time and understand how come you came to that profession, which is quite unique, and very few people get to do it.
Yeah, no, I guess as a child of the 80s, I guess I was maybe a little bit influenced by Mike Brady and Legos, and so it seemed to me that building things was something I certainly enjoyed doing. And kind of designing as I went. And then, it was just Mike Brady had that cool house. So, man, architect must be the way to go. And then I ended up pursuing that into higher education. I went to Penn State and got my degree in Bachelor of Science in Architecture. And what I really learned along the way was that I had sort of a specialized passion within architecture. And it wasn't so much about museums or necessarily those types of buildings, but I really found my calling in sports architecture in my fifth year when my thesis project was a ballpark. It was a site that I had played baseball on. It was a really great way for me to kind of reminisce and think about how sport had affected my life. And so that really put me on my path to being a sports architect, and then I followed that passion to Kansas City, doing research, and found that at the time the majority of those practices were located in Kansas City, and joined that rich tradition of sports architecture in Kansas City back in 1997. And so I've been doing it ever since, and I went from being the new kid on the block. Now I'm one of the older guys in the room sometimes now, which is quite different.
So your project was redesigning the ballpark you played on, you say?
Yeah, so I played baseball in high school, and then I played City League baseball when I was in college. And so there was a place that I played that I chose as the site for me to reimagine a ballpark. And at the time, it was actually unique because I actually had a client. There was a minor league team, an independent team, that had relocated to that area. And so I utilized them at the encouragement of my professors as my first client. And, after I was done, I had this enormous physical model that I had built that they actually requested that they could keep in their headquarters for some time. And they've since changed hands and moved to a couple of different places. But at the time, the Altoona Rail Kings was my first client and my first, venture into sports architecture, and man, it lit a fire that's burned ever since.
All right. So for the people who know architecture, who were your mentors? You know, the people you admired.
So, I really started that. The mentorship for me really began in my 5th year in architecture. I probably chose the two most difficult professors to be my thesis advisor and my secondary thesis advisor. I think I appreciated the way that they treated me. I was an athlete all through high school. And so, I like to be coached maybe more than I like to be taught. So they really knew how to, coach me through that. And then I was really fortunate. I had two really great breaks. The first was when I came to HOK Sport in '97. It's a big company and still is. It's where I currently work now. There was an individual there that it took me 9 months to discover that he was there, but he was a Penn State alum, just like me. Played football at Penn State and had a really great professional career. His name was Scott Radisick. And so Scott kind of took me under his wing and really did a lot for me throughout the first 14 years of my career to put me where I'm at today. Subsequently, when I felt like it was time for me to, broaden my horizons a bit and take on a new challenge, I met a gentleman by the name of Tom Wagner, who at the time was a principal at 360 Architecture. And they were looking for somebody to come in and really follow in Tom's footsteps and take over the college athletics market, which is where the majority of my work had been prior to that. And so ended up striking a deal, and I came over to 360 as a partner and really did, take over for Tom, but really had the opportunity to learn from Tom and in a new and different way than I had been under Scott. And so I would say that those two have been most influential in my career in terms of giving me the opportunities and setting me up for success.
I like what you said about I like to be coached and not to be taught. And I guess there might be a parallel in the way you manage your clients. We're going to go back to that after. But now that you are at HOK, well, you've been there for some years. Can you tell us more about HOK and the Sports and Entertainment Business Unit?
Yeah, I think HOK's it's a bit unique to be part of HOK in the sports practice because HOK is not solely a sports practice. So they've got an incredibly robust healthcare, science and technology, aviation. And so there's a lot of parallels that we're able to draw between when we start to look at things across market. But, I think that from a brand standpoint, HOK Sports started in 1983. They were really the pioneers of the reimagined sports industry. And so there's a lot of brand recognition there that goes to the sports side, but it's a very robust company. And what's really been great is, just to be able to be a part of, you mentioned Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. That really sort of was a pivotal moment, I think, in stadia design, in that, there was a lot of paradigms that were challenged with that project and things like how a retractable roof could or ought to work, the way that a scoreboard is integrated into a venue in a new and unique way, food services offered, or, is a part of the fan experience, how it engages the city. I mean, I think all of those things were really critical to that success of that project. And so, we're able to take that. And I think what we probably pride ourselves most is that, we do like to ask, what if? What if this was the way that we did this versus that? Is it better? Does it change our train of thought in a different way that all of a sudden unlocks something that's incredibly unexpected? And I think that those unexpected moments are what we really live for. And so that's really what I believe we're about as a company is, pushing to evolve and innovate. And innovate gets used a lot, but really evolving toward an unexpected outcome is really critical to our practice when we think about design.
Yeah, That's a key point you mentioned. I mean, you're in a market where you don't have tons of projects a year. I mean, there's a few big projects a year in the US and in the world. I mean, new big stadiums, new big infrastructures in sports. But the result of your project, I would guess, depends a lot on your clients as well, because at the end, there's the one, making it possible. So what is the process when you start working with a prospect or a client? Do you coach him? Do you teach him? What is it you wish to understand to make the best, proposal possible and something unique each time?
Yeah, I think it's such a unique niche market, first of all, that I think that, by and large, a majority of the people that are in this market, whether they're architects like me or whether they're clients, team owners, administrators at college level, coaches, they've all been around the game, whatever game that is. And maybe it's multiple games. And so they understand what it's like to be the athlete, to be the coach. And so I think that that's just a language that comes natural to me in terms of, the way that we communicate with our clients. And so, and it's very comforting to our clients too, that we do speak the language. And so, you sort of have it or you don't. And so I think that that's really the first key, is the effective communication and really being on the same plane. And then you do start to understand, from your client's perspective, we always remind ourselves that these aren't our buildings, it's theirs. They're just asking us to make it great, and whatever that definition of great is. And so we really listen to what they're asking us to do. And then we come to them with solutions. And again, it's that unexpected solution that, sometimes is very exciting to them and other times is a little bit terrifying to them. But at the end of the day, that's why they want us there, is to be able to, take their vision and make it reality. And the most critical part of that, absolute most critical part of that, is that we listen. We put our egos away and we listen, and we do what our clients are looking for us to do.
Right. But I guess, we're going to go to, Rich McKay, president and CEO of the Atlanta Falcons, MLS team and owner of the stadium, mentioned once, each major decision when it comes to the stadium was based upon its impact on the fan experience. So in that case, that was in his vision, I guess. I want the best for the fan experience. What is it that your clients are asking you the most?
Yeah, so I think that, in the sports industry has never been challenged more than it is right now, for sure. But leading up to this pandemic, the real challenge was in attendance and getting people to come and engage in the venues. And you've seen across the industry, whether it's at the college level or the pro level, that there's been an attendance issue that's been brewing for some time. And so when Rich talks about that fan experience, it's really about creating an environment, creating a set of circumstances that lead up to a memorable experience that makes you for sure want to come back and do it again. And you're not just going to want to sit on your couch and watch the game the next time. And so fan experience at all levels of, ticket price is incredibly critical to the success of the venue. And so what they're asking us to do is create an experience that no longer centrally revolves around just the action on the field or on the pitch or the diamond or the ice rink. It's about more than that now. And so it's about, in many of our projects recently, it's about the district that surrounds the venue. And how does that fan experience begin well before you ever make it into the venue? And how does that experience of actually getting to the district, how does that feel? How does the city welcome you? So those are all things that we need to factor into when we think about designing a building and siting a building and how it integrates into the fabric of the city. Those are all critically important components to ultimately prove whether or not we've done a good job of creating a wonderful fan experience.
That will lead, well, do you think there's been a change in the last years, in the requirement from the owners when it comes to building infrastructure? You mentioned more focused on fan experience, more focused on the surrounding, the whole journey of a fan, I would say. What those changes do you envision?
Yeah, I think, in the last couple of years, and you can point to several different projects, whether it's the new LA Rams venue that's going up, or the recent Atlanta Braves, or in our case, Little Caesars Arena, or the Edmonton Oilers new arena, where district development was critical to the success of that venue. And so, really what that has done has expanded the draw of fans beyond just those that are ticketed. There's a really great example. I was fortunate enough to do a project at Notre Dame, which is a United States collegiate football powerhouse, and has been for quite a long time. And, in doing that project, I began to understand culturally what was unique about Notre Dame. And South Bend is a small city in Indiana, but on football Saturdays, the population of that city swells, and there's actually more people that come to the city of South Bend just to experience what happens outside of the game versus those that are in it. There's only 80,000 people that can get into the game, but there's several more than that are outside of the venue and just experiencing that, being a part of the event without being actually in the event. And so, I feel like, particularly under what we're facing right now, there's going to be a need to delve into that further and look for ways for people to engage in the event without necessarily going into the event. And we're already seeing some of that occur. Esports is a big part of that, and how technology and augmented reality have really created an opportunity to view an event in a new and really exciting way. And so I think that, technology, which is, core to what your mission is, I think technology plays a huge role in the future of sport venues and how the fan truly integrates. I think it's that next frontier of the fan experience. And I don't think that it's only going to occur at the venue. I think it's going to go from the venue all the way back to your living room in some way, shape, or form that is truly going to drive viewership and engagement of the fans in a new and unique way.
And is it part of your job to also think about that full experience where you connect the physical and the digital world?
Absolutely. I think that we're not doing our job if we're not thinking about that holistically and really, contemplating what a move towards a different type of consumption would mean to the live experience, and how that can not only influence but inform what that live experience really ought to start to be. I think that if there was any positive, which it's hard to find them, but if there was any positive that came out of this most recent pandemic that we're facing, it's that it challenged creative people to think really differently about what that might mean. And so I know that, we've taken a swing at a couple of different ideas about things that we could do, particularly in an environment where there are no fans or limited fans, to still create what would be a memorable game day experience, not only at this point for the fans, but for the players as well. Because it's got to be pretty tough to go into a giant building that seats 18,000 and not have those people in there and still compete at the highest level. There's the potential for a deflated sort of environment that you don't want to have. I think from a television perspective, you can mask that. And I know that our broadcast partners around the country and around the world are certainly looking at ways to do that. But I guess I'm going a little off topic, but I do think that, absolutely, we need to look at that holistically, because one informs the other.
So what is it? It's not off topic. It's I think it's very concrete, and it's great you mentioned it. So what's your inner innovation process? I mean, because it's not only being able to do what you did 10 years ago. I mean, the scope of work is way broader and way more holistic, as you say. And so it's new functionalities in the stadium and surrounding, it's new technologies. How do you do to keep up to date and to think about the future and envision what's next, to be always the first to do it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's actually fairly simple, in my opinion. Architects are problem solvers. At the end of the day, we're given a set of parameters, and then we're asked to assemble those parameters in a unique way, right? And so I think that what we're being given are a constantly evolving set of parameters, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's technology innovation, or whether it's a new app that does this, or whether it's a new way to illustrate the game, whatever it is. We're giving an evolving set of parameters, and so we have to problem solve to those evolving parameters. And so that's what drives innovation, I think, is as new challenges pose themselves, the creativity gets unlocked to try to solve them because they haven't been solved before. So that's what really drives the innovation, as the way I look at it.
Yeah, in necessity in you. So the parameters is a mother of all inventions. If you had to define, it's kind of a masterclass. So if you had to define 10 key success factors for designing a state-of-the-art sports facility, sports and entertainment, obviously, what would be these 10 factors?
Well, I don't know if I can give you 10, but I'll give you as many as I can. There's some basic things for us that are sort of prerequisites, and from our clients' perspective is we need to respect their budgets, right? That's really important, and we need to really do a great job of listening to them to meet their expectations of their vision within those budgets. So I think that the first thing is you have to have a happy client at the end of the day. I mean, that's sort of step one. If you don't have that, then whether you did great things on the rest of it, it really doesn't matter. So that's really critical. Then I think have you pushed the experience forward? And I had a really great partner at 360 who was somebody else that really taught me a lot, George Heinlein. And George would always push to, in every project that we did, innovate in some way to do something differently and better than we had done it in the past. So don't just, pull out the old set of drawings from the last project and copy and paste it over. We really need to study each and every component of this in a new way that responds specifically to the new challenge. So I think that's a key part of, what we do as well. I think that, absolutely with these venues, whether it's integration into a city fabric or whether it's integration into a campus fabric, I think that architecturally, the way that you treat the design and the aesthetic of the venue has got to be, not only respectful of your client's desires, but also respectful of the context around it. I think that that's an important piece of what we do. And then certainly, is the venue one that at the end of the day, people want to continue to come back and experience? And I'll share a personal experience that I had. As you can imagine, I go to a lot of games, or used to until recently, but I've attended quite a few sports events across all the different markets. And I went to the Super Bowl at Mercedes-Benz 2 years ago. And for those that watched it, they would remember that was not a very exciting game at all. It was pretty boring. I don't recall the final score, but I think it was something like 13-10, something like that. Wasn't a lot of scoring, wasn't a lot of big plays. But I wasn't bored at all because the venue picked up and made up for it. There was just so much going on that, really sort of, it didn't make the game on the field secondary, but it gave you a distraction when there wasn't excitement on the field to view. And so I think that speaks volumes to what a great building can do, particularly in the sports industry. I think I gave you 5 or 6. I don't know if I'm going to get to 10.
Yes. Do you think that experience that you feel when you're in the stadium, the design of the stadium and the digital experience, you could translate it to the audience and on TV or social media?
That was maybe challenging. I did my best. I was actively on Twitter throughout that game, and because there was just so much to show. And then I at last year's Super Bowl down at Hard Rock Stadium, which was another one of our projects, I was doing the same thing, and that had its own sort of unique moment. It was an open air versus a domed, retractable roof stadium. But there were so many things about that were innovative. I thought that, one of the more memorable things that I took away from that was the integration between the spectator and the halftime show, because they handed out these wristbands that, were coded to the light show. And so they basically, you as a spectator were part of the halftime entertainment. And I don't know if that came through on the television broadcast or not, because I was there. But that to me was another step toward how a venue can help support the potential of integration of the spectator into the event. And I thought that was really smart and clever. And so that, I think that there are ways, but I think that the best thing that our teams and buildings have going for them is, unless you're there, it's really truly not like it was. So it makes people want to come and be there and experience that.
Yeah, so the fans become not only spectators or experience something, but they make it. They make it happen.
That's right.
Yes. So, yeah, there's a massive potential in the future. And it's a lot part of the success of platforms like Twitch. The interactions between the fans and the gamers, is constant. And so it makes a big difference. You're really part of it and part of a community and have an impact in some ways. Interesting things. And when you design a stadium, what kind of parameters do you have in terms of business potential for the owners? So, because there are more and more levels of suites, levels of ticketing, levels of services from dedicated catering to some sections or concessions. And so how do you embrace the needs of growing business? How does it work, the relation with the client on that?
Well, I mean, each one of these buildings is an investment, right? So you have to start there and acknowledge that that's truly what it is. And behind that investment is, a whole lot of data that makes that investment pencil out. And so a big part of that is the revenue opportunity that particular building, proposes to the investor. And so, we're usually given a set of parameters specific to the return on investment as it relates to the seating and the potential for that. I think one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, and we've had numerous examples of this, is where, we're given a market analysis, and several firms out there do that. CSL Legends is one of the more prominent ones. Brailsford and Dunleavy is another. They're really good at what they do in terms of predicting what the market will bear. We take that information and then we begin to overlay our creativity over it, and maybe create some offerings that weren't necessarily part of the pro forma, but specifically react to or address a specific need in that city or for that team that nobody had thought of. And so at that point, what you've done is you've actually taken that pro forma and made it better. And it's important for us when we get into a stadium project like that, as we digest the revenue pro forma, we look for areas where we can, as creatives and as architects, improve that. And that's a critical piece of what we do to have, at the end of the day, my prerequisite, which is really, really happy clients.
Yeah, and it's funny because solutions are very different depending on sports, market, and therefore target audience. I remember an example of the modernization of Manchester United Stadium. Manchester United Stadium is not a stadium made for, top level hospitality because the fan base is not this type. Whereas a Chelsea Stadium would have a massive potential when it comes to hospitalities, and you would give away a lot of low price tickets for higher price tickets. So on what you say, I understand there are a lot of, tailor-made solutions based on a market and a sports. Is that difficult for you to understand the different targets and sports in that sense? Well, obviously you're going to say no, but.
Well, I think that we spend a lot of time up front in the early phases of design getting to know our clients, getting to know their culture, and then, by and large, getting to know the culture of their fan base and of their city. And so it's not just something that you snap your fingers and you show up and but as you've been in it, I'm getting up there in terms of my years in the profession, so it comes a little bit easier to me. But you do have to take the time to understand the research, digest it, but then also get to know them culturally. And so there's a lot of things that are in paper and that are in spreadsheets that you can learn from and understand as a basic starting block. But the real magic comes from understanding the culture of the team, understanding the culture of the city, and infusing that culture ultimately into the venue. And it's not difficult, but it takes an investment of time. And it gets back to that key point I made earlier, which is listening, and not coming in with a preordained solution that you just borrowed from somewhere else.
Does the process involve testing ideas with fans?
Yes, in many cases there is, and we have examples around the country where we are in an ongoing, almost like a test kitchen scenario, where we're rolling out new ideas on a small scale within venues just to see how the fans respond to them. And then if it's a favorable response, it gets a more widespread integration into the venue. If it's not, then you learn from it, and the client hasn't made a significant investment. They all investment, but they learned a lot of their fame, their culture in doing so. So yes, in some areas where we're in an existing building and performing renovations, which is a significant part of the industry, we have that opportunity to almost test out ideas before implementing them more widespread.
What are the new, functionalities and technologies that you have used the most in recent years and you think will keep on growing?
Well, I would say for certain that we touched on it a little bit, but the fan integration into the event is key. And you mentioned Twitch, and certainly the e-gaming world is doing a better job of this than some of the sports or collegiate world. But giving fans the opportunity to just engage in some way. It wasn't that long ago that you would go to a building and you wouldn't have very good Wi-Fi. And I remember personally being very frustrated by this. I'd take a picture and I'd want to share it on social media, and I couldn't get it to send or to upload. And so that wasn't that long ago. So
it's still not happening in many European clubs, for example.
Yeah. So, just that very simple step of giving a fan the connectivity to do what they want to do in terms of sharing their experience is a big part of the fan experience, because you know, part of why people go is so they can tell everybody they went. And they don't want to tell everybody they went tomorrow. They want to tell them while they're there. They want to go Facebook Live. They want to, you know, have the concert going on in the background. You know, they want to take a selfie with the mascot, whatever it is. So, you know, that's a big piece of it from a technology standpoint, is how can you utilize tech in a way that allows the fan to engage even fuller in the live environment. That's a key thing.
Do you think 5G will make a big impact?
I would assume so. I think to be determined, but I would certainly assume so. And I can't point to any specific example that I have necessarily where it has yet, but I absolutely believe so.
Do you also believe, do you believe that sustainability is part of the requirement from the fans? Do you see a switch in the fan, you know, expectation when it comes to the owners and that build the stadium, you know, the activist fan in a way?
I think that, you know, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but I'm glad you asked the question, is not only understanding, you know, what the owners are looking for, but also understanding the fan base. And when we get into that, sometimes we look at the fan base from a generational perspective.
Yes.
And, you know, what is important to this generation versus that? And who are your next group of fans coming up? And what are they really, truly most interested in? And certainly sustainability has continued to grow in momentum as we move through the generations. I guess I'm technically considered a Gen Xer, although my son will playfully call me boomer every once in a while, and I'm horribly offended. But, you know, so, you know, what was important to me is maybe very different from, you know, his generation at 16 years old. And as owners and as architects, we need to digest and understand what those criteria are that's going to be important to him, because he's going to be the next group of fans that are going to be coming up through and spending their money on something. And if you're not meeting what's important to them, then you may not get that. So, but I do believe that sustainability will continue to gather momentum in the sporting industry. And I think that, you know, just as we're going through this pandemic and sort of starting to see what the reduction in consumption has really done from an environmental impact standpoint and how it may overall impact our sustainable footprint. I mean, for all the negatives, there's an incredible positive there. And I think that, you know, as we come out of this and we begin to go about our daily lives a little differently, there's certainly been, I think, a bump to the sustainable side coming out of this.
Can you give concrete example for, you know, for people to dimension what was a normal generation stadium to a green stadium today? What is the real impact? How to measure it? And what are the, you know, the techniques or, you know, that you can use to increase those numbers?
Yeah, you know, I think that probably the first step is truly awareness. And, you know, I think early in my career, LEED was just getting started. And so there was a lack of awareness about what it truly meant to be sustainable and what the venues could be. And then there was this LEED thing that came out for all of us to start to look at. And there was a checklist of different strategies that you were encouraged to employ in order to promote sustainability within that particular organization. And as that began to gain momentum and began to be adopted, the awareness around it grew. And all of a sudden you went from owners that were saying, yeah, I'm not interested in that, all it does is add cost, to the industry responding and saying, well, you really ought to be interested in this because it doesn't add cost, it actually saves you in operating costs. And so we really, I think as an industry, champion bringing sustainability to the forefront. And, we've been able to have examples like, Mercedes-Benz is LEED Platinum. I mean, and there were a lot of innovative ways that were employed in that don't show up on a checklist that really needed to be implemented in order to get it to that point. And it dug all the way down into the watershed and understanding that and how you treated that. So it wasn't just a building specific, it was a geographic response to the way that sustainability can be a part of it. So yeah, I'm really encouraged. And, we have a very robust sustainable practice within HOK that responds to all of our different building types. And, we've got an incredibly talented woman in our Kansas City office, which is probably our biggest sports practice, Vanessa Hostick, that is just amazing at how she can communicate to somebody who's not quite as educated on it as she may be. But she's able to communicate to me in a real meaningful way about, how I can advise our clients on ways to do things. And so she's a tremendous asset to our sports practice, and we're very fortunate to have her.
Do you think we could go up to the point that sustainability is not only about, public image, but it's also a business case? Because you mentioned you can save on operation.
We're already there. We're already there as a business case. It's absolutely, from an operational standpoint, it's already a business case. There are things that we can do as architects and designers to allow the ability for our owners to spend less to operate their venues.
And
so already
settings, is there a higher cost? Sorry for my ignorance in that, but is there a higher cost in building sustainable solutions? I mean,
not necessarily. No, not necessarily. It's that is something that was early on in the movement, maybe even proven out. But now that we've gotten a lot more adept at applying what we know, it's no longer, you got to spend more to save more on the back end. You can spend the same amount, or in some cases spend less through smart, sustainable planning to have a less carbon footprint on your facility.
Very interesting, because the business case is always talking a lot, to owners of stadium, but also clubs and leagues, and it's same language as they speak. So super interesting. And we've seen also a trend of multifunctional venues up to COVID, where stadiums are transforming to hospitals or beds for. And it's a beautiful use, by the way, of a venue. So how does it complexify your work when you have to think, if it's an NFL stadium, only 9 games, if I'm correct, at home, if you're not going to playoff. So there's still, 350 days or 340 days a year where you can do things. How is it important for you? How does it complexify? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of revisiting what I spoke with you about down in Mexico City was, I kind of felt like when stadiums were first designed, they were multi-use, and you had a baseball team playing where a football team played. And then the leagues reacted in a very strong way to create team-specific or sport-specific venues. And as you look across the evolution of projects now, the revenue model has shifted, and it's much more contingent on event days versus just a sport event days and the revenue driven out of that. And we've talked about Mercedes-Benz a lot, but that building is really a Swiss Army knife for a variety of different events that it can host. It already hosts 2 pro franchises for their MLS franchise and their NFL franchise. In its inception, it actually hosted more collegiate football games than most home college venues did, because it was such a desirable location to go to. It has the capability to host Final Fours, so you can bring basketball into the mix. It has the capabilities to host international friendlies. So it's really critical. And then there's, just the other things that it could do, like a boat show, as a a kind of a silly example. I know I actually I was in Minneapolis, and I went into the new Vikings venue, and I was there, and they were having a Christmas show. So you go in there, and it smelled like Christmas, and on the floor there were all these vendors that were, just selling their things related to Christmas. So the ability for these venues to adapt to a multitude of different experiences and examples like I just shared is critical to the financial performance. So it's almost like we're going full circle, and we're going back to where multi-use is certainly in vogue.
All right. All right. Speaking with you, preparing that chat, you were mentioning, we were speaking about the COVID impact. And will it have an impact on the requirements on stadium? Obviously, how can your designs contribute to reducing the health burden of COVID and potentially respiratory infections, and make people comfortable, feel safe that they can go to a stadium and they will have a full journey that is safe when it comes to infections?
Yeah, when this all started, everybody had a million questions, right? And we really didn't feel like we were ready to provide answers, because we weren't confident in what we knew. So we took our time, and I spoke to this a little earlier about the diversity within HOK. One of the things that we did was we looked to our healthcare experts, and we looked to our science and technology experts to really begin to understand what it was that we were up against in the built environment. And one individual in particular, Randy Cray, who is the leader, he's my peer as a market leader for our science and technology group. And Randy spent a great deal of his career designing infectious disease laboratories. So if anybody understands, what to do with this, it was Randy. And what Randy, he didn't necessarily give me answers, but he gave me a framework to allow me to have a conversation to drive towards answers. And what that framework was that in the absence of a vaccine, there is no safe environment per se. Anything that we can do as design professionals is aimed at mitigating that risk. And so that was the first bit of education that he taught me, that even in the most highly secure infectious lab, there is no guarantee of safety. So we're certainly not going to have that in the absence of a vaccine in an arena or a stadium. And then they have a hierarchy of risk that basically are ways to mitigate risk. And it goes all the way down through elimination of the risk, substitution, engineered controls, administrative protocol to PPE. Those are really the 5 pieces. And so as we started to frame our conversation around sports facilities in that hierarchy of mitigating risk, we were able to sort of plug in solutions at each one of those levels. As an example, temperature screening. Is there, that's a way to eliminate the risk by not allowing somebody that's potentially a carrier in. Substitution, I talked about a little bit, which is, everything between basically being at the live venue and being in your living room. So is there a way to substitute your engagement in the event in some new and different way? A lot of the conversation revolved around the third hierarchical piece, which was engineered protocols. So that's, people were discussing UV light. People were discussing ways that the mechanical systems could potentially, stave off the illness. A lot of different things that were talked about there. We also have spent a great deal of time on the administrative protocol side. Social distancing or physical distancing is a part of that. That's an administrative protocol. So all of those different things are things that you can apply to the venue. Now, at this point, we're not advising our clients to go out and spend a whole bunch of money to go build something new right now. We're still not at the point where there's concrete enough evidence to know exactly what is the right thing to do. A lot of what's going to be implemented, at least between now and I would say probably for the next 12 months, is going to be more along the lines of temporary and administrative protocol that are aimed at mitigating risk, whether that's limited attendance, that's physical distancing within the seating bowl, that's, creating pathways of travel that are directional so that you mitigate, cross points. And I think that, technology probably has the clearest path to impacting this, because places that haven't yet implemented it, you can go to a very touchless type of scenario where your ticket taking is touchless. Your transactions, whether it's a food service or in the retail market, is all done via an app on your phone. So those all become touchless. Grab and go, employing almost an Amazon type approach to the way that, things are bought. So there are opportunities. And I think that of those that I just spoke of on the technology side, those are ones that could and maybe ought to be implemented anyway.
Yes.
There's no downside to that. So if our clients were to spend money, there's certainly a good case to say that you're not going to be out anything if you do that. Like that will benefit you not only today, but 5 years from now. So that's sort of
actually not on the response, but also on the experience when it comes to all the contactless solutions.
Absolutely. Convenience is king. We all want to do stuff as easily and as quickly as possible. So if there's a way to fold, a way to mitigate risk into convenience, it's kind of a home run.
Yeah. And you were also mentioning that maybe in the future could be, in the multidisciplinary stadiums, the fact that becoming a solution for a community is something you need to have as a parameter in some ways.
Absolutely. And we've seen several examples in this recent pandemic of ways that, whether it was a convention center or a sport facility, was either converted or eyed for conversion into, something that would be beneficial to responding to the cause. And I think that you're always going to have that. I remember Mercedes-Benz down in New Orleans was iconic in that it was a place that was a response to Hurricane Katrina. So it gave people a place to go. Now it took a beating, but it was a place that was able to help out the cause. And I think that we always have to be mindful of how these large venues are able to transform in a way to support when we have a disaster like we've had.
Great. Fantastic. We're going to go through a quick list of questions, surprising questions for you. Very much from, Inside Actor Studio. Meanwhile, the audience can keep sending questions in the Q&A part, because right after this quick question, we'll go to the Q&A. So, Nate, ready?
Ready.
What is your favorite word?
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, is it?
Probably can't say it on the broadcast. No, that's a tough question. Shoot, I'm failing already.
You're failing already. Okay, so what's your least favorite word?
Well, it's maybe not a single word, but it's I can't. Um, I do a lot of coaching, and so probably my favorite words would be those of encouragement to young kids, and probably my least favorite is to see them doubt themselves and say that they can't do something.
Okay. What turns you on?
Sports, man. I love sports. I I live it, eat it, breathe it all day long, every day. I love sports.
You're lucky to be in Kansas, where you win in baseball, when you win in American football.
Absolutely.
Not a
Yep.
place to be. What turns you off?
Negative people.
Who's your favorite designer?
Bill Johnson. He's the guy who designed Mercedes-Benz. I have to tell you a quick story. I know this is rapid fire, but I met Bill when I came to 360, and that guy blew my mind. He is so incredibly talented and creative. I've never experienced anybody like that. He's by far my favorite because I get to work with him every day. I mean, there's lots of great architectural designers out there, but I don't get to work with them every day like I do Bill.
Cool. What is your favorite stadium? It doesn't have to be one of yours.
Well, I'm a little bit of a homer. I love Beaver Stadium at Penn State. When you have 106,000 people and it's a whiteout on a Saturday night, there is nothing like it. That is a fan experience that you can't recreate in any way. It's incredible.
100 and how much? More than 100 people? 100,000?
Yes.
What is your favorite sound in a stadium?
Oh, wow. I think it's when, well, I guess I'll go back to the baseball because I love baseball too. It's when they sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I just love that. That's just so traditional and so, down homey, and just, it just kind of takes you back. That's really fun. I enjoy that. The organ plays it, and it's great.
What is a project you are the most proud of?
Boy,
Any client, right?
you know what? This is tough, but it's also pretty easy. So I had an incredible experience. We got to work with the Chicago Bears on Hallis Hall, and I didn't know a lot about. I mean, I knew what most people knew about the organization, but then I had the opportunity to spend time with the people. And that project is probably the one I'm most proud of because I'm so proud of the people that I got to meet and develop relationships with. They are the type of client that I would do absolutely anything for. They are just wonderful people, very trustworthy and down to earth. And it was just an amazing experience. I'm very proud and I'm very humbled and thankful that I had the opportunity to be a part of that project.
What is the one you say, man, I wish I could have?
I wish I could have.
Well, maybe difficult one, maybe not on screen.
From a project standpoint, we're just yeah.
Frustration, I would say. Maybe I should rephrase. What is the thing you would love to do you could not do yet?
So we talked a little bit about Kansas, but I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I grew up a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and I bleed black and gold on Sundays. And if I ever had the opportunity to work at Heinz Field for the Steelers, that would be a dream come true. Now, my brother-in-law, who's actually at a competitor, has gotten to do that several times. So I'm very jealous, but I'm always interested in hearing his stories because of how much I love the franchise.
Great. So it will be part of your design bucket list.
That's right.
What's next? What's next in your entertaining life bucket list?
Ask the question again.
What's next in your life, normal life bucket list?
Oh boy.
Or I could say, what is the first thing you will do when we forget COVID?
Oh, I'm going to go to a concert or to a game. Like I am so ready to go, just experience a live event. I was so bummed out. We were going to go see Rascal Flatts at the Sprint Center in Kansas City at the end of July, and I just discovered that they had canceled it. I love country music, and I love going to live events, and so that's the first thing I'm going to do. I think in a bigger context, um, I was able to travel abroad during school and spent a great deal of time in Italy. Then when I got married, my wife and I went back to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. I think that a return to Italy is certainly in the future as well.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I'd love to be a college or pro coach. I have the opportunity right now to coach my son's 18U competitive baseball team. I've been coaching him since he was 8 years old in baseball, and I've really kind of evolved and grown as a coach. And if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be coaching.
Beautiful. 2 weeks ago, we had the U.S. Olympic Committee VP Summer Sports, so in charge of high performance. And he said his biggest joy, in the last months, was to go back to coaching. And he's coaching his kid as well. Different sport, but it's the same philosophy. He just feels he loves it so much, coaching the kid. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I guess I would hope that he would say, hey, you weren't perfect, but your heart was in the right place. Like that'd be good enough for me.
Great. We're going to go to some questions. We've got a few from
Okay.
Do you like it?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Question from the audience. Okay. Question from Dulce. Is sustainability being considered in the design process of new stadiums in terms of waste, clean energy, and water use? I guess you've answered part of it. Maybe you could be a bit more precise on, the key points you work on in sustainability.
Yeah, so certainly those are the key points as they illustrated, from waste to water and those kind of things. And I think that, we have certainly a partnership on the waste side with our contractors in terms of, minimizing that and making sure that they're integrated into that process with us. And then, I think actually one of the more interesting things is that I think that, with this pandemic, I think that, things like water are going to be impacted even further because of how everything is going to go touchless. It just, it's, if it isn't already in a venue, it's going to be implemented. And so that's just going to further support that piece of it in terms of being sustainable from a water usage standpoint. So it's such a broad topic, and I think that anything and everything that we can do to partner not only with our owners but also with our builders just makes the case that much better.
What are the biggest certifications in that space?
LEED Platinum, I would say, and then going beyond that, I mean, there hasn't been one yet in a sports facility, but net zero is probably the holy grail, and certainly something that we're striving for within HOK is to get to where you have a building with a net zero footprint. There are examples out there of other building types that have achieved this. And, I think that, getting to a net zero sports facility would be an incredible achievement.
Great. Francisco Ramos, how can you design the return on investment proposal for a stadium based on ticketing, M&B, branding, TV transmission, merchandising, etc.? Is that part of your job, to design a return of investment proposal?
Yeah, no, I mean, that, at the end of the day, that is basically what we do with every venue. Is we look to not only maximize the investment from a spectator standpoint and what they're purchasing from a ticketing standpoint, but then also create an environment where they're going to then spend money, whether it's before they attend the venue in a surrounding district that's controlled by the team, or while they're in venue on a food and beverage or a retail perspective. And then also from a consumption standpoint, how are they actually consuming while at the event via their devices? And so that you begin to integrate all of those different things into a holistic ROI, which gives the owners an opportunity to fold in things like sponsorship and advertisement in new and unique ways. And so it's quite an ecosystem from a return on investment. And so that's sort of what we pride ourselves on doing with each one of these is exploring and exploiting any and all of those ways to do that.
Interesting. Question from Luis Frias about the FIFA World Cup Qatar 22. Stadium infrastructures, their legacy, sustainability, good practices. They're going to remove things, blah, blah, blah. So what do you think of it? What do you think about these infrastructures and the impact?
I guess that I wish I was a lot more educated on all of those venues than I truly am. I know that our firm did a peer review of the Q22 venues. We were engaged to do that. I was not a part of it. But I guess that my hope, and I guess I'll go philosophical for a minute here, and this maybe ties to things like the Q22 or the Olympics or any events like this. My hope is that there's a life after the event, and that these significant pieces of infrastructure aren't simply constructed and then left to not be utilized anymore. And that I feel like philosophically in any of these types of investments, that there needs to be a second life for every one of those venues that somehow contributes culturally back to where they're constructed. So I think that, probably that would be my comment on those. And not knowing if there is a second life for those, I certainly hope that there are.
In case there is not a second life, I'm not judging but in case there is not, because Doha, many stadiums, World Cup, small population, it's hard to think about second life. Is there a sustainable way to spread, how can I say, divide sections, transport it, and move it to other places, up to other countries, and still be sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely, and that really ought to be the consideration for something that's a once in a generation type of event like that. That you build the venue for Easter Sunday, but you better figure out a way to be able to bring it back down to a realistic scale for the remainder of its useful life. And so there are strategies that you can employ to build a semi-permanent venue that has pieces that can be demounted and repurposed in a new way. And I think that, that ought to be the way that design is approached for anything like that, is that it really needs to, have some other usage beyond what it is. And that could just be to go to the scrap heap.
So it's possible. It's very much possible. And not
it's possible.
Complex.
Yes.
Okay. Question, anonymous. Normally I don't take anonymous questions, but in that case, I don't even understand the question, so I'm happy to asking to understand. Do you think vernacular architecture could be used to build sport facilities? I don't know what vernacular architecture is.
I don't either.
Okay. All right. So we forget that one. Okay. Another one from Joanna Deagle. Standards and building regulations in accessibility for disabled people range across the globe. And at the same time, accessibility requirements from tournament and events organizations also varies. How do you manage this challenge when trying to design a sustainable venue that accommodates the range of requirements and standards?
Yeah, so I think that, first and foremost, we understand what those specific set of parameters are, and we look to achieve them or do better. And I know that, ADA in the United States has a set of guidelines, which is federal law. And then but there are also ways that you can implement even better solutions and more of a barrier-free type of design that actually enhances those types of things. And so I think that that's what we try to do is we try to look for ways to enhance that. We had an opportunity at Northwestern where we did some renovations to Welsh Ryan Arena, and Pat and Shirley Ryan were major benefactors of that project. And they were very interested in how we could not only achieve, but go beyond the requirements of accessibility and ADA. And what it led to was a facility that met the requirements, but met the requirements in an incredibly unique way. And had you just read the requirements, you wouldn't have probably done it that way. But because there was such a concerted focus on making it even better, you started to question, what those requirements were and say, well, we can do this better this way. We can redistribute this in a new way that really makes this better. It meets the statement that they're looking for, but it actually does it in a better way. So I think that, again, that gets to the innovation and the way that you can sort of challenge the norm to make it better. And so that's certainly how we approach any and every venue that we do.
Great. Let's see. Luis, which do you think is the most iconic venue in the world? And if you had to design the chance to redesign a classic stadium, which would it be? Maybe we have the answer with the Steelers, but I don't know.
Well, I guess I'd hate to be a homer and say that, Mercedes-Benz is the most iconic. It's certainly up there.
So you would choose a recent stadium. I mean, it's only a few years, more than a historical stadium.
I think so. I think that, we had this debate when I was in college about would it be appropriate for somebody today to contemplate a redesign of St. Peter's facade? We're over there and we're sitting in there and we're looking at it and we're having this debate. And so I wonder, when you look at venues like Wrigley or Fenway, which are truly historic and iconic baseball venues, man, wouldn't that be something to be able to take on a challenge like that, but be respectful of the true essence of what that venue is? I'd put Dodger Stadium in that, mix. So I think that, maybe tough to answer what I view as the most iconic, but I certainly feel like if I was going to take on a challenge, it'd be somewhere in baseball and it'd be one of the older ones.
So that leads to a question. So if we take the Wrigley Field Stadium, fantastic experience.
Yes.
And it's an old, I don't remember, but the age, but it's fantastic experience. If you were the owner of the franchise, would you rather, if you had to build something, would you rather build something from scratch, meaning with a new DNA, or you would use the existing DNA of the stadium? Is it better to consolidate on something that is so difficult to maintain, or think something new and offer something totally new?
Yeah, that's an easy one to answer, I think, because the building should reflect the culture of the fan base, and certainly the culture. And if you take Wrigley or Fenway, those buildings embody the culture of the fan base. And so it would be an incredible shame if there ever was a new Wrigley, which I doubt there will be, but there was a new Yankee Stadium. So never say never. But if there was a new Wrigley, it ought to and better embody the culture of the old Wrigley in a lot of ways. It might not look like it, but it's got to capture it. It's got to capture the essence. That's probably truly one of the most difficult design challenges you could ever do.
Yeah. Question from Jonas Bogart. When you visit a stadium for the first time, what are the first things you look at? What will be the first things you notice?
All of the things that aren't right or that don't work. I think that's unfortunately, like as an example, when my wife comes with me to a venue, she's struck by all this amazing things, and then I'm looking at like a railing detail and how that doesn't work, or how a seating bowl little in the corner doesn't rectify itself. I'm starting to pick up on all the stuff that's kind of weird, or doesn't seem to be thought out. So that's, unfortunately, it's kind of a curse that those are the things that my eyes gravitate towards. And it's the same in projects that I've worked on, where I remember, going to the field for the first time on a project that I had, done design on, and they were actually building it, which was just blowing my mind. It's like, wow, they're actually doing it. And then it was like, I got so hypercritical of decisions that I had made because I didn't truly understand how those would transfer to the field and to the actual built, or hadn't, thought about it as much as I should have. So that's just something that I think is just born in you when you're an architect, and you sort of gravitate towards the things that could be done better.
So you go to a stadium with a checklist in mind. And the thing about your job, I imagine, is that if you see things you want to change after, most of the time it's super difficult to change.
Absolutely. No, that's why, it's been great as 3D visualization has continued to improve, and I've seen a dramatic improvement just in my career. You can begin to understand more and more things. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's countless instances where you walk out to the field and it's like, this is the way that's going to look, and there's not much we can do about it without a significant investment. And so you have to make the best of it, for sure.
So that also reflects the importance of planning and, not doing things too quick. Yeah. A question from Ciro Procuna, a famous TV commentator, sports talent. Have you ever visited Azteca Stadium in Mexico City? Old venue, but it still has events like NFL, when not canceled, once a year, and will be part of the World Cup 2026. How would you improve it?
Well, unfortunately, I've never visited. So it would be difficult for me to speak about how I would improve it. I wish I had, because I'd love to talk about that. I know that a lot of the audience probably has a lot of emotions tied up in that venue. So unfortunately, it'd be difficult for me to comment just because I've never been there.
All right, Ciro Procuna, I guess we have to invite our friend Nate to a game soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all would have a lot of fun, especially when it's, well, not only national team, but America's club as well. But national team, I've got so much memories. It's, the Mexican national anthem in the stadium, Azteca Stadium, especially when they face United States. It's just crazy. You feel the stadium in vibes. It's beautiful. I guess I'm an anthem is always something amazing, whether it's yours or not. I'm French living in Mexico, and I can cry listening. Well, I've got so much time in Mexico, but it's just, this is my best sound in a stadium. National anthem, when it's sung in the stadium, it's just massive. All right.
Well, based on what you just said, those are certainly things that I wouldn't want to change at all. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So those are some things that if I had the chance to improve it, I don't want to go there. Those seem to be working out okay.
All right. So thanks a lot, Nate. We're going towards the end. I appreciate a lot your time, you sharing, with a diverse audience. I always appreciate our conversations, by the way.
Me too.
I guess next time it's going to be Mexico City Stadium, and do Facebook Live or anything to comment on what's fantastic and what can be improved.
I'll be there. I'll be there for sure. That sounds wonderful.
Yes, and thanks again. And next week we're going to keep on, SiS Masters. We're going to have the Director of Strategy and International Relations of the Spanish Football Federation. Very different topic. They've just launched their first ever strategic plan. So as surprising as it is, being such a successful federation and national team. So we're going to speak about the importance and how you build a strong strategic plan when you're a sports organization. So thanks a lot, Nate. We'll keep in touch. See you in Mexico, and cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arnaud. Thank you.